Hello, everyone, and welcome to For the Love of Animals, a presentation of Pinellas County Animal Services and Inspiration 1110 AM. I'm your host, Len Szynski from the Pinellas County Communications Department. For the Love of Animals is a celebration of our connection and commitment to all things animal-related in the Tampa Bay area. And during the next hour, we'll be sharing with you information about the animals we love and the services and programs provided by Pinellas County Animal Services. You know, every dog owner loves to take his or her dogs to the park, and it's something the dogs enjoy as well, very much so. Pinellas County parks are great places to enjoy the outdoors with your dog, especially in the fenced-in dog parks, where dogs can frolic off-leash and do a little doggy socializing as well. But there are rules for both dogs and dog owners to ensure that everyone has a pleasant experience. With me today to explain our park pet policy is Chief Park Ranger for Parks and Conservation Resources North District, Trevor Spink. Trevor, hello, how are you?
Good morning, Len.
And welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So nice to have you with us today. Trevor, you know, we have a lot of curiosity about pets and parks and what they can do and what they can't do. So let's explain the basics for us. First of all, when do dogs have to be leashed when I bring my dog to the park?
Anytime you're in one of the Pinellas County
No
parks,
exceptions.
No exceptions. They must be on a 6-foot leash at all times.
Okay. Can I let them off just a little bit, maybe, to run around just the area where I'm at?
We have designated areas such as the dog-friendly park.
Okay.
And that's designated strictly for the dogs to go into. You must take them in with a leash, have a leash with you at time of going into the dog-friendly park, and while you're in there, and you can then release them, let them play. There's 2 sections to the park.
Well, let's talk about that, because several of the parks, let's see, Sandkey Park, I know, Walsingham Park, several of the parks in the area do have these designated dog parks for big dogs and little dogs.
Correct.
There you go. But there are rules. You can let your dog off leash and run around, but you can't let him go wild. There are rules to follow. So give me some of those rules.
Okay, the handlers of the dogs, they are responsible for cleaning up after the dog, picking up their waste,
especially in that any place in the park.
Exactly. They're responsible. They must have the dogs under control. Mm-hmm. And make sure that the dog is not aggressive. There is a limit of 3 dogs.
Okay, you can't bring your whole herd.
You can't bring the pack of them in. Yeah. No, exactly. And dogs in heat are prohibited.
All right. Okay. Keep those dogs away from other dogs, for obvious reasons.
No dogs under 4 months of age.
Okay. The little puppies can't handle the excitement.
And naturally, all the dogs must have their proper vaccination.
So they have to have their tags up to date, and they have to be vaccinated.
Tags, correct.
Now, you mentioned that there are areas for dogs, for the big dogs and the little dogs. I get a lot of complaints from people that think they can put their big dog in the small dog area. And you know why? Is because sometimes the big dogs kind of tear up the grass, and if there's rain in the forecast, it gets a little muddy. So people think they can put their big dogs in with the small dogs because there's better grass in the small dog area. But why do you keep those 2 sizes separate?
We fully understand that, and we had this situation down at Eagle Lake Park, in which in the wintertime, the one larger dog section becomes wet and the smaller section's nicer. It's out in the sun, it's open, so the larger dog owners want to take their large dogs into the small dog.
People complain about that. People with the small dogs hate that.
And it's not fair. That's absolutely right.
So how do you enforce that rule? Do you patrol regularly?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
And as soon as we get a complaint from patrons, when a ranger's in the park, they will go to the dog section, and we hang around there. And if we see anybody, we try to educate the people.
And is there somebody on duty? If I'm there with my dog and I see a violation of the rules, can I flag somebody down on patrol?
Yes, most certainly can. There's always people, parks personnel in the
Because the parks
park.
are big places.
Yes, they
sometimes
are.
It's hard to find.
We unfortunately, we don't have the manpower to station a ranger, particularly there at that time.
But there are people there nonetheless,
yes,
and they'll help you to enforce the rules if they see an infraction. A lot of the parks have boardwalks.
Yes.
I think Anderson Park and John Chestnut Park have these boardwalks. No dogs allowed on the boardwalks.
It's clearly posted.
And why is that?
They're small. They're small areas. And unfortunately, not everyone is dog friendly. And people will say to me, the gentleman up there is allowing his dog to run not on a leash.
Yeah.
The dog runs up to the person and
not everybody is a dog lover in Pinellas County.
Correct. And we try to, talk to the people to educate them that this isn't fair to the public.
Now, we mentioned the dog parks, great places for dogs to run around unleashed, and of course, follow the rules. I understand no food, don't bring any food into the dog parks with the dogs, because that could drive them crazy. No smoking as well. We don't want cigarette butts where the dogs frolic. But there's also a great place down at Fort DeSoto Park. Not only do they have the regular dog park, but they have a dog beach as well.
That's correct, and they can take their dogs on the beach, and it's great.
Any special rules for that part of the park?
Well, naturally, to clean up.
Once again, that's the big cleanup rule. And you're telling me that some people just don't. There's been piles of dog stuff on these boardwalks, the wooden part of the boardwalk, which is pretty disgusting if somebody else is walking along. As you said, they're very confined spaces.
And we had an incident like this just up at Howard Park.
You mentioned that before, and I wanted to get into that story because a lot of people ask me about the pet policy for Pinellas County beaches. Now, we don't regulate the beaches that are under the jurisdiction of the municipalities, but we do have Sandkeep Park, Fred Howard Park, Fort DeSoto Park, and you're telling me no dogs on the beach?
No dogs on the beach, and the reason for that is sanitation reasons. And one day I was at Howard Park and I was called to the beach area, and it is clearly posted, and a gentleman had his dog on the beach.
And somebody complained.
And someone complained, and I went up to the gentleman. His dog was in the water, and his first reaction was, "Oh, the dog's fine, it's just playing," and this sort of thing. And with that, the dog went right in the water. Well, people were furious.
Oh, no.
And I said, that's just why we don't allow dogs.
There you go. Case closed right there.
He went and got a bag. I made him clean up, and I couldn't get him off the beach fast enough because of the public.
The public was turning into an angry mob.
That's right, yes. And so that's a case. We had another incident over at Chestnut Park where a gentleman had just gotten a rescue dog, and he had it off the leash and was throwing a stick for the dog and threw it into the water at Lake Tarpon.
Oh, my.
And the dog went after the stick.
You know what else is in the water? Sure. Did it happen?
Yes, it did.
Oh, my goodness.
And the dog came up, and there was an alligator right there, and fortunately, how lucky this dog was.
There are signs posted
right
to keep your dogs away from the water's edge.
And fortunately, the dog made it out okay, but he had to take the dog to the vet. But this is why we have these signs posted, not only but for the safety of the
Absolutely.
animal.
They don't just make signs for the sake of making signs. There are good reasons behind the messages.
The rangers are constantly going up to people, asking them not to get too close to the sides of the water with their dogs.
Well, we've talked about the trails, the recreation trails, the boardwalks, and the dog parks. If I'm in the park, either by myself or with my dog, and I encounter an overly aggressive dog, what should I do? Who should I call? What's my course of action?
Your course of action, naturally, if there's a ranger around, we're right there to assist you. This has happened. We had a case on the Pinellas Trail where there happened to be two pit bulls running down the trail loose, and a rollerblader came up to the ranger and told him, and he went and got between the lady and the two pit bulls and managed to get them, and we call Animal Services right away.
So it's probably not a good idea to confront the pet owner myself.
The pet owner, 99% of pet owners that bring their pets into the park are very, very considerate in that. And what they will say when we confront them is, the dog, it's a friendly dog, it wouldn't hurt anybody. But we tell them, you got to take into consideration of the feelings of that person.
Yeah. So, to recap the whole situation here, no dogs off-leash anywhere in the park, unless it's the dog, fenced-in dog park.
Correct.
Even then, read those rules, abide by those rules.
Please do.
Because they're there for a good purpose. No dogs on the boardwalks at all. No. Can you take the dogs along the other recreational trails that are in the parks?
Oh, sure.
Okay. It's just that closed-in boardwalk that we want to be considerate of. People that may be just afraid of dogs or don't like dogs for any reason.
Yes.
All right. Trevor, Trevor, thank you very much for that insightful information. Next time we go to the park, we are certainly going to take all that advice. We're going to heed all that advice.
Len, thank you. My pleasure.
I'd like to thank my guest on this part of the program, Chief Park Ranger for the Pinellas County Park System, Trevor Spink. And we would encourage our listeners, if you have any comments or questions on anything we've talked about on this program, send us an email, animals@pinellascounty.org, and we'll share your concerns on a future edition of For the Love of Animals. You know, raising a dog costs a lot of money. Maybe you don't have to worry about college tuition, but you do have to pay for pet food, medicine, chew toys, and other necessities. Are there ways to economize? Dr. Caroline from Pinellas County Animal Services shares some advice next. Stay with us. And we're back. Welcome back to For the Love of Animals, a presentation of Pinellas County Animal Services at Inspiration 1110 AM. I'm Len Szynski with the Pinellas County Communications Department. Adopting an animal is a big obligation. Now, we're always promoting animal adoptions on this program, but we're also upfront with the fact that the cost of pet food, medication, and emergency medical treatment can be a substantial expense for pet owners. Americans are expected to shell out a whopping $55 billion on their animals this year, according to the American Pet Products Association. But there are ways to save money. And with me today to share some advice on the subject is Dr. Caroline, Director of Veterinary Services for Pinellas County Animal Services. Dr. Caroline, hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good to have you on the program, as always.
Same here.
You know, a lot of people have to turn their pets into animal services. We talk about that a lot on this program. That's where a lot of our adoptable pets come from. But one of the big reasons is that it costs too much to keep the pet. They just can't afford to keep the pet anymore, and they turn it back in. So on this part of the program, I want to talk about maybe some ways to save some money on pet care, pet food, pet medicines and toys and that sort of thing. Are there bargains out there to be found on pet food, pet medicine?
Well, you know, in a lot of these kind of things, you get what you pay for, but there's definitely ways you can be a smart consumer and, you know, save as much money as possible. I think one of the big things, though, is before you add a new pet to the family, make sure that you're financially able to do that. And that's really comes back to planning well when you're adding to your family, making sure that you have those resources. Now, with, you know, the recent changes in the economy, some people found that they were able to afford pets, and now because of layoffs or other issues aren't. So that's a little bit different situation, but I think planning as much as you can before you get that pet is the first step to making sure that this goes well.
And I understand that it's true what you said, that if you buy some of the cheaper food, you're only going to wind up feeding more of that food to the pet because it's not as nutritionally complete as perhaps a more expensive pet food, so you don't want to cheat yourself that way. But can you find the good food? Can you buy it in bulk? Can you find good prices online? How can you be a smart shopper in that regard?
Well, I think typically buying, especially when it comes to food, you know, price shopping, picking a brand, that's middle of the road as far as price, buying in as big of bulk as possible. You typically save the most money, but always double check your prices per pound or per ounce to make sure you are getting the best price. Looking for coupons. You know, there's a lot of coupons for pet products, and so looking for those carefully, either in your Sunday paper or online, that can help. And comparing, you know, between your local pet stores and your local box stores and your grocery store chains to see where you're going to get the best food, following those specials, stocking up when it's on sale or when you have a good coupon. Those can be all ways you can cut down on the cost but not compromise your quality.
People spend a lot of money on pet grooming, you know, and they feel that taking the dog to the pet store or to a professional groomer does a better job, and I'm sure that's true. But are there things that we can do at home to save money on basics in pet grooming?
Absolutely. So, you know, brushing your pet, especially if they have long hair, on a daily or every other day basis can really decrease the need for grooming. Bathing at home, getting your pet used to that, learning how to trim the nails, which is something very simple that you can do. You can look up, you know, videos on YouTube how to do that. Those are all the kind of things that you can do to help save costs. Also, depending on what kind of pet you have and what kind of grooming they need, potentially doing some of that grooming at home, especially if you're keeping up on brushing and your pet's not severely matted and things like that. A lot of the grooming you might be able to do yourself. Now, it may not look as good as a professional groomer probably, but it's going to serve the function of keeping your pet healthy and happy and looking decent.
And I think the dog will be just as happy with the way he or she looks. What about things like flea and tick medications? Dogs and the animals need flea and tick medication on a monthly basis. Most of them do. But it can be pricey. It can be expensive.
It can. And this is one of those places, especially with flea, tick, and heartworm preventions, that we want to make sure that we don't skimp. You know, this is a place where, yes, it is expensive, but if we don't prevent these kind of infections and we get fleas in the house, we have to treat the house and the yard, and our pet gets a skin infection and we have to go to the vet for that, that's a lot more expensive. Same thing with heartworm disease. It's much, much better for your pet's health, not to mention your pocketbook, to prevent heartworm disease than to treat the disease once it arises. And typically the best place to get these products is through your veterinarian, and a lot of people think that online or internet pharmacies are going to be a better deal. But typically your veterinarian has extremely good prices. If you find a better price online, often they'll price match. And they often have rebates and coupons through the manufacturer that the online companies don't have, that can help keep the costs down. Now, one thing people always need to be cautious of when they're ordering those kind of products on the internet is making sure that they're going with a certified pharmacy. There are a lot of pharmacies outside the United States that offer look-alike or imitation or counterfeit products that look just like the products that you're used to getting from your veterinarian. But if the price is too good to be true, the product's too good to be true as well. And I've had a number of clients that have purchased products from overseas that were imitations, and then their pets got infected with fleas or heartworm disease. And because they tried to save a little bit of money, they ended up costing themselves a lot more. Another thing we find too is if we purchase through our veterinarian and we purchase a good brand name product, most of these products have guarantees. And so if you're treating your animal for fleas and they get fleas, you know, and you're applying the product right, there's some recourse there where they'll help with that. Same with heartworms and intestinal parasites. So definitely a place not to skimp. Make sure that you're taking care of those things. You're giving it every month on schedule. That's going to save you a lot of money in the long run. It's kind of like with a car. You know, if you don't change the oil, then it's going to cost you a lot more with engine repairs.
So you can't save money by cheapening that ounce of prevention.
No, definitely not.
But is there a way? I know every when I had the cat, every week I had to go to the grocery store and buy some cat litter. It's like every week it was an expense, and some of those cat litters, you know, they're all real fancy. But can I make my own cat litter? Can I use something else as cat litter? How important is name brand cat litter?
I think the importance of cat litter is really what is your cat comfortable with. Some cats are very, very particular to a certain type of litter or a certain odor or things like that. And if they don't have that type of litter, they're not going to use the litter box, which is a big deal. That's going to cost you a lot more as far as replacing other things than just getting the kind of cat litter your cat likes. But other cats aren't that picky. And so trying out other things, sometimes shredded paper can work well. That's going to be very cheap, but isn't going to offer the odor control that you'd get with a commercially available cat litter. Trying out some different types, but just watching your kitty closely to make sure if they stop using the litter box because you changed the litter, it's probably the litter that's bothering them, and making sure you go back to the one that they liked.
All right, there you go. You know, we've talked about bringing the pet to the vet on a regular basis, but sometimes when we have a pet emergency, if the pet needs an operation, if something goes wrong and we need some emergency care, that's going to be a pretty pricey bill that we get handed with. And I'm wondering, is there any financial assistance available for people who maybe just really can't afford to have that operation for their pet, or maybe pay for that expensive procedure? Are there any financial assistance plans available out there? Any of these animal welfare groups maybe can offer someone a break?
Unfortunately, there really aren't. And it would be a really great service to the community if that kind of money was available. But most of the animal groups that are out there, especially the nonprofits, are so taxed with resources with dealing with homeless pets that they can't even begin to help out pets with owners. There are some emergency lines of credit. One of them is Care Credit, and most of the emergency clinics and a lot of regular veterinarians have that, which offers 0% financing on those bills to kind of buy you a little bit of wiggle room to pay that off. But as the pet owner, you know, if your pet has a medical emergency, you need to be prepared that there's going to be some cost associated with that. And if that's not something that you're able to do, realize that you may be in a difficult situation where you may not be able to provide treatment and have to consider surrendering your pet or even euthanizing your pet.
Oh my goodness.
Which we always hate to talk about, but as a realistic kind of situation if your pet needs a $2,000 operation and you can't afford it.
Will the vet work with you on a payment plan, perhaps?
Some veterinarians will, especially if you have a long-standing relationship with your veterinarian. So that's an option, but I wouldn't count on it. A lot of veterinarians have a very, very narrow margin and aren't really able to carry a whole lot of accounts receivable.
Yeah.
So it's really best to have a credit card or emergency savings account, or apply for a care credit kind of program, or borrow from family and friends in the event something like that occurs.
Is there pet health insurance out there?
There is. And there are a number of companies that offer pet health insurance. So that can be another option if you're unable to have something set aside for your pet, but you're able to make the payment on a monthly health insurance. That can do a lot to defray some of those unexpected medical costs.
So it's expensive to raise an animal, a cat or a dog, but you got to keep some money in the budget for those unexpected expenses.
You do. You do.
All right, Dr. Caroline, thank you very much. I'd like to thank my guest on this segment of For the Love of Animals, Dr. Caroline, Director of Veterinary Services for Pinellas County Animal Services. Remember, if you have a question for Dr. Caroline, simply email it to us at animals@pinellascounty.org, and we'll get you the answer right away in a future edition of For the Love of Animals. Well, coming up after the break, we find out more information about the pets we love and some of the important programs provided by Pinellas County Animal Services. You stay with us. Well, welcome back to For the Love of Animals. I'm Len Szynski from the Pinellas County Communications Department. Now, being a responsible pet owner means spending time with our pets, feeding them a high-quality diet, training them, making sure they get ample exercise, and taking them to the vet for regular checkups. But being a responsible pet owner also means being aware of how our pet impacts the natural environment. And with me right now to talk to us about how a pet-friendly person can also be a more environmentally friendly person is Tracey, Solid Waste Program Coordinator for the Pinellas County Department of Environment and Infrastructure. Jan, hello, how are you?
Fine, Len. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, Jan and I get together in a lot of different educational programs for Pinellas County. She's always terrific, and she knows her material backwards and forwards and upside down. So
aren't you nice?
It's good to have you on the program today. Jan, this whole business of being environmentally friendly and being green, and reducing your carbon footprint, I think people don't realize that even their cat, even their dog, as small as they may be, they have a certain carbon footprint in the sense that it takes so much energy and effort to put together the dog food or to manufacture the cat treats, and there are ways of reducing that impact on the environment, and I think that's what we're going to talk about here this morning.
Great, and you always think about the containers that you get your dog food in, your cat food, and your treats. You've got the cans; those are steel cans. They belong in your recycling bin that you put out at the curb or at the one of the drop-off centers around the county.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. A big campaign here in Pinellas County is to encourage people to do recycling, and there are 3 R's connected with the formula of recycling. So go over that with me a little bit.
Well, we teach them to the children and to adults every day: reduce, reuse, recycle, and that comes into play with as you feed your cat and dog. As I mentioned, the steel cans, but also all those dog treats and dog food comes in what we call paperboard cartons, and that tears, so that belongs in your recycling bin as part of mixed paper.
So people do a lot of recycling. They recycle their newspapers and their aluminum cans and that sort of thing. So all of these containers that they buy for their cat or dog, all of that goes in with the mix.
Yes, and we ask you to crush those boxes. Don't leave a lot of air in. And also, if there happens to be a wax paper insert in, such as a lot of times our cereals all have wax paper insert, please take the wax paper insert out and just put the carton into a recycling bin.
Now, I understand you don't really have to do a lot of separation with recycled materials like perhaps you did years ago.
No, that's right. We've gone to most of the programs are going single stream now, which means you put everything in your recycling bin and it gets separated at the processing facility.
So that's great. That's a real convenience for people trying to do the right thing. Maybe they don't have time to do all that sorting, and categorizing. So now just dump the whole bunch out front maybe, and the recycling truck will pick it up or take it to the recycling center yourself.
Right, and let the other people do the work. You give us the materials and let the recycling industry separate them and
Has that been a pretty good idea? Have you been able to
Yes,
gauge more people are participating now that you made it a little
Yes,
easier?
a lot of the city new programs that have gone single streams, they're seeing a increase in their recycling, some up to 50% for
that's
curbside
great.
recycling. So it's very exciting.
And once again, all those dog packages, people buy a lot of dog food, a lot of dog treats, and it just the flea, the flea medication comes in little cardboard things, and all of that can definitely be put in the recycling bin.
Right. Yes, we hope when you have any waste in your hand that you're thinking about putting in the trash can, think, can it go into the recycle bin?
So reuse is one of the R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle. So we're talking about recycling, the steel cans and the paper products, reusing things. You had a whole list of ways to do that. So tell me about reuse.
Think about your pet toys that you have at your home, or your collars, your leashes, and a lot of those items can be used by the animal shelters, including our own Pinellas County Animal Services Department. Maybe as your puppy grows into a dog, or an unfortunate situation that your dog passes away, you have all these items around, and it can be used by another animal, and it could really help with heal your emotional pain to know that another animal's helped.
And you have a whole list there of things that they're looking for.
I do. I have a few things that most of the shelters take, such as pet beds, crates, especially the collapsible ones, ceramic food bowls, leashes, collars, scratching post, pet toys, but not children's toys. Remember, these are for
squeaky toys or whatever the pet plays with.
Right. Cat litter, unopened cans of food, and then they would love to have your clean blankets, towels, sheets, and small rugs, but please wash them first and be considerate of the next animal that's going to use them.
Don't want to spread any fleas around with used animal blankets.
No, and we suggest that when you do donate items to the animal shelters, that you call the animal shelter first to be sure that they take those items. A lot of the animal shelters have wish lists published online. We actually at the county have some of these wish lists published in our A to Z guide. So for a quick resource, actually even a list of some of the animal shelters around, you can go to pinellascounty.org/utilities/get rid of it, and then click on pet supplies, and it'll give you a lot of tell you where the shelters are and what they take.
And of course, it's not only Pinellas County Animal Services, but all the shelters in the area can benefit from somebody's need to donate to some of these
absolutely, and
excess
it saves them money if they can. They get animals that end up in the shelters. They need a leash and a collar, and helps them out.
Once again, the recycling guide, the A to Z guide, is such a wonderful resource. It's because it's web-based. It's updated daily as changes come in. We can keep that document real fresh, real current. And boy, if you want to get rid of anything, you check that A to Z guide, and you'll find a category for whatever it is you need to get rid of.
Thanks a lot, Len, for that advertisement. Yes, we have
truly.
over 350 items on the A to Z guide of suggestions of how do people get rid of their waste and specific items. As we were talking about recycling, another item that people are always asking us about is plastic bags. And I'm sure you and I do, and I'm sure you do, take your reusable bags to the grocery store, but we still have plastic bags, especially those bags that are in the newspapers that come in every morning, and the dog parks and some of the city and county parks can use those bags. They actually have what are called poopy bag holders.
You can never have enough plastic bags at the ready because those dogs are always ready. So you've got to be prepared to spring into action.
And if you can take those old the plastic bags that you don't need anymore and take them and put them in the poopy bag holders that are at the park, somebody will reuse them, and it actually saves money because a lot of the cities in the county don't have money to buy these bags. So
and
help them out.
We're always talking about people buying recycled products. And I think pet owners can avail themselves of some of that strategy as well. Usually you do have to do a little detective work to find out if the product you're buying is made out of recycled materials, but that's there on the label. Right.
You look on the label and it'll say 50% recycled content, and that's true not only on pet toys but stuff that we buy for ourselves too.
Absolutely.
That's part of that loop of reduce, reuse, recycle, is to actually buy products made out of recycled
And I wanted to
items.
share this story while I was doing some research on the subject. I came upon a video from a lady in Portland, Oregon. She's a bicycle enthusiast, and she started this own little business where she's actually using old bicycle inner tubes, apparently bicyclists go through a lot of those, and she's recycling them into dog leashes and dog collars made out of this very soft, pliable rubber material, and apparently it's very comfortable for the dog. It's very stylish for the dog walker. And it's just one example of somebody specifically taking something that would normally be thrown in the landfill and yet recycling it into a practical product that dog owners can use to walk their dogs or to make their dogs look good.
That is exciting. I hadn't heard about that particular reuse, but it's always nice to hear about people's imagination and ingenuity and how they can handle that. And I don't know if you know or not, Lynn, but a lot of fleece items are made out of old plastic bottles. So when something says it's fleece, which could be a dog
it could
sweater
be as well, or
a blanket or
the
something.
dog beds sometimes are lined with that fleecy material.
That's it could easily have recycled content and actually come from old plastic bottles.
So goodness knows, if you have a dog, if you have a cat, you're certainly at the pet store often enough, buying them all kinds of things, cat condos and beds and all sorts of toys and whatnot. And once again, look at that label, and if you can find something that's made out of recycled products, it's much better for the environment, much better for this green planet Earth to make that your purchasing decision.
Certainly, and that means we're not using our natural resources to make a new product. We're using what we already have, and that's so important.
And, it reduces the amount of debris in the landfill, maximizes the resources that we get from planet Earth. It's just a good idea all the way around.
It's great. Really appreciate your promoting reduce, reuse, recycle is in the animal world and the people world, too.
Dog owners, pet owners are responsible citizens, too. So we appreciate the effort of everybody involved in this campaign. Well, I'd like to thank my guest this time around, Tracey from Pinellas County Solid Waste Operations, and we've been talking about ways to reduce your pet's carbon footprint through reducing, reusing, and recycling pet products and supplies. We remind you that Pinellas County Animal Services is now looking for volunteers of all ages. If anyone in our broadcast audience is interested in volunteering their time at Pinellas County Animal Services, complete information is on the Animal Services website at pinellascounty.org/animal services. Just scroll down and hit volunteer or send us an email at animals@pinellascounty.org. Well, coming up after the break, we go to the mailbag once again to answer some of your questions about cats and dogs when we come back. Welcome back to For the Love of Animals, a presentation of Pinellas County Animal Services and Inspiration 1110 AM. I'm your host, Len Szynski, and joining me this time around is John Hohenstern, my old friend John Hohenstern, Senior Animal Control Officer from Pinellas County Animal Services. And John, how are you again?
Oh, pretty good. How are you this morning, Len?
Good to have you on the program this Saturday morning.
Nice to be here. Thanks.
John, we are in the mailbag. Got a lot of interesting emails this week, and I want to get right to it. Here's one that came in, and I know it came into your office just a couple of days ago. Erica from Clearwater. She has this long story about her neighbors. For the last 2 months, she says, they have an unaltered male pit bull tied up in the backyard. He is scared of storms, screams when bad weather approaches. His owners throw food in his bowl, leave him there with no interaction, other than the profanity. They yell at him when he barks too much. Not only is he tethered, he is also muzzled. She has several photos of this. Please do something. They need to surrender this dog immediately. It's pretty obvious that they are using him as a stud and treat him as lumber the rest of the time. Now, we've talked a lot about animal abuse, animal neglect, and we've talked a lot about the fact that there is a wide spectrum, a lot of shades of gray between an animal that just gets the best of care and a loving forever home and to an animal that experiences neglect and animal cruelty. I know you got something like this, and you get a lot of emails like this that come into the agency. What do you do when you get an email like this, and where do you put them on that spectrum, that vast spectrum between good and evil?
Well, we get an officer out to see exactly what's going on. What condition is the dog in? How does the dog look? How does the dog react? Does the dog have food, water, and shelter when it's outside? Our new tethering ordinance, or our tethering ordinance, does allow for a dog to be on a runner or pulley system outside in a yard for a good long time. But also, I think in the email it says that he's out there in all kinds of weather.
Well, that's what she says here, yeah.
And, unfortunately, we're not going to be out there when it's, coming down with rain or whatever to the to the extent it has been lately. But we just get a snapshot, and if everything we see looks good, there's really not a lot that we can do. I mean, if the people are within the ordinance and the dog looks like it's in good shape. If it's properly licensed and vaccinated, if it's not, that's something that we can do to, we can give them, hey, look, this is your responsibility. This is what you're supposed to do. You live in the most densely populated county in the entire state. People are going to, see this dog or hear this dog if it's outside in the inclement weather. We got a complaint. That's why we're here.
Well, how much of this is perception on the part of Erica? I mean, she's looking at this dog saying, well, I would never treat that dog that way. I would never treat my dog that way. And how much of this is fact from an abuse point of view?
Well, I'm sure, from Erica, it is, the dog is being abused. The fact that it's out in the yard, 24/7 in inclement weather, it is. It shouldn't be out there if it's storming or whatever. They should bring the dog in. But there are a lot of people, we live in a very transient county. We've got people from all over the country, and, not everybody considers a dog to be a member of the family.
Yeah.
The dog lives in the yard. That's where a dog belongs.
Well, I know once again you guys respond to a lot of these kinds of incidents, and sometimes what you find is quite heartbreaking. And I got an old press release here from an incident that happened in St. Petersburg where you guys actually went out, and the animals, the treatment was so bad that you actually, the state attorney's office charged this individual with felony animal cruelty and misdemeanor animal neglect. Now, these are legal terms that bring with them legal punishment, but it's going to be the worst of the worst case you've ever seen for this to kick into effect.
Yeah, that was pretty bad, but I mean there are some awfully horrible conditions that we found some dogs that were just barely alive.
Yeah. But you do investigate, and if it's a bad situation, you'll take corrective actions.
Yes, we'll act on what we see.
So keep those cards and emails coming, because you do investigate every single complaint.
Right, and then plus it helps to have a history. Like if we've never been out to that address before, and we have no previous complaints, that kind of doesn't. It makes it look pretty good for the dog owner, because
nobody else has complained.
Yeah, it can't be that bad because we don't have any other complaints. But keep them coming in. If you suspect something's happening, PinellasCounty.org. You can email us, or you can just give us a call at 727-582-2600. We answer the phone 7 days a week from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Call in. You can be anonymous. We just need a good address to go to, and you tell us what's going on. We'll get someone out there.
Absolutely. Okay. Here's another email from Amy from Danbury. Oh, she's coming down to Florida soon. She's not here yet, but she's moving with her company, and she's having trouble finding an apartment that allows iguanas. I can't understand that. And it is kind of a funny email. She's got a pet iguana, and I know that Animal Services doesn't really deal with exotic pets, licensing or regulating exotic pets, but I'm surprised. We talked earlier. I'm surprised at how many exotic pets there are out there. Yeah. You were telling me snakes.
Lions, tigers, bears, and
truly,
and
all kinds.
They're regulated by the state, by the FWC. You're supposed to be permitted to have these animals, and because we live here in Florida with hurricanes, you're supposed to have an evacuation plan, and where you're supposed take these animals and where you're going to be taking them to in case something happens or whatever. Because some of these are dangerous carnivores or poisonous reptiles, and it's amazing how many of these animals are in Pinellas County.
And when you get tired of that pet, don't just dump it into the park.
Yeah, that's right.
Especially the lions and the tigers. We don't want to see those in the park.
Or even the constrictors either. But with the iguana question, we don't have a restriction on iguanas. Different, we just like we said, we told her that different apartment complexes might have different rules for different things. Maybe you'll have to prove that the iguana's in a proper enclosure where it can't get loose and threatening other residents or whatever, or become a nuisance. But it's up to the apartment.
Just keep the iguana out of the window.
Yeah,
that's the best advice.
Probably. If no one knows, that's a good thing.
Here's a email from Jeff from Clearwater. Now this is kind of interesting. It's a long email. I'll just start it out here. He says, His home has been targeted by a gang of feral dogs headed up by coyotes, and they're looking to chow down on his cats. One apparently was a victim, and he's got 3 more in the house, and they're kind of staking out his house. Kind of a bizarre email. But, we talk a lot about feral cats in Pinellas County and how some neighborhoods are just inundated with feral cats. Are there feral dogs? Are there gangs of feral dogs? I mean, is it a problem? You're rolling your eyes.
Well, a number of years ago, there was a feral dog problem up in North County.
Really?
Yeah. And it took quite a long time to, with tranquilizer guns, take them out one by one by one.
I think I remember that, yeah.
But it sounds like it's a group of coyotes that, got his outside cat once.
Yeah.
And they know that there's a food source there. And they think that, if they hang out there, there'll be another cat that comes out. And, unfortunately, coyotes love outside cats because they are a food source. But, if he keeps his cats in and secures his garbage and doesn't give them an easy meal, they will move on.
Yeah.
And he's absolutely right. They're just after food. Once the food source is gone, they'll move on.
So the coyotes really aren't recruiting stray dogs in the neighborhood to do their bidding?
Not that we know of, no. Everything,
Is that possible? Do coyotes and dogs get along that well together that could happen?
It's possible that they could be, co-breeding, yeah. I mean, anything's possible.
Yeah.
But, I haven't seen the result of that yet myself. But, anything's possible.
Gosh, it's the beginning of the end. It's like being in a Stephen King novel now.
Or, animals like to pack up, too, sometimes. Or maybe if it's a dog that gets out all the time and... who knows?
Who knows? Okay, so watch out for those wild animals. Connie from St. Petersburg, she is doing market research. She's going to open up a dog grooming shop in Pinellas County, and she wants some market research, so she's asked Animal Services to provide a breakdown of dog licenses issued in Pinellas County by zip code. Now, I know all of this is public record, and that means that anybody can have access to anything that we know about addresses, names, where they live, that sort of thing. But how do you handle a request like this? I mean, I would hate to think that if somebody is dutifully furnishing you all information for the dog license or the dog chip, where if they move or make sure you have correct information. We're always exhorting people to keep your database updated. We would hate to think that it would be used in a marketing campaign somewhere down the road.
Exactly. And there is something in place for that. If she is asking just for the number of dogs that's registered in an address, she's going to get, or in a zip code, I'm sorry, she's going to get, 17,803. That's going to be her answer.
Okay.
It's not going to be, the addresses of all of these
addresses and email and that sort of thing
that are in the zip code.
So it's very unlikely that I could wind up on a mailing list if I'm registering my dog.
We'll do everything we can to prevent that from happening because we don't want that information to be exploited, like you said.
I know, and there are a lot of dogs and cats out there. She says here there were over 70,000 dog licenses issued in the whole county. I presume that's over the course of a year. Is that true? Do you all issue that many?
I think it's even more than that.
Really?
Yes, sir. I want to say it's closer to almost 100.
Every year, 100,000 dog licenses get issued and renewed and everything. Yeah. So, and that's it. We're such a densely populated county. There's so many people, and it seems that there's so many dog owners, that own multiple dogs, several cats, and it's no wonder that your department is so incredibly busy all the time.
Yep. Make sure everybody's licensed and rabies vaccinated.
And that's very important. And that is one thing that
health and safety.
we can't underscore that enough. That's very important for people to do that. License the microchip, get those rabies vaccinations, make sure their dog stays healthy, and make sure you all know about it too. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our program this time around. I want to thank our guest, John Hohenstern, Senior Animal Control Officer with Pinellas County Animal Services. You have been listening to For the Love of Animals, presented by Pinellas County Animal Services and Inspiration 1110 a.m. Be sure to be with us next Saturday, 11 a.m. to noon, right here on Inspiration 1110 a.m. for another episode of For the Love of Animals. And if you have any questions or comments on anything we've talked about on the program, just send us an email at animals@pinellascounty.org or give us a call at area code 727-582-2600. For more information on Pinellas County Animal Services, including photos of the dogs and cats up for adoption this week, go to pinellascounty.org/animal services. Once again, thanks for listening. I'm Len Szynski with the Pinellas County Communications Department. Join us next time for The Love of Animals.